So shall we start? So before we are dealing with the cosmic consciousness.
Yes, Rangata.
And the cosmic consciousness, he has gone into great detail. So very, very briefly, when you go into the cosmic consciousness, there can be two types. Okay. The first type is that you see yourself in everybody. Okay. You see yourself in everybody. Srebdo says in one sonnet, to whichever person I turn, I see myself with another face. So essential unity of all things is established. Then that's the apprehensive consciousness. But there is a comprehensive consciousness. You see the whole universe within yourself. That's a comprehensive consciousness. Then there is something else. When you have this apprehensive and comprehensive consciousness, you are aware of your own individuality. But that individuality is not the ego. The ego has gone because the ego always makes you feel I am living in my body mind life. Even mentally, if you are aware that you are not the ego, you will feel that I am living in my body mind life. That's the ego. But when you come out of your body mind life, the ego disappears normally and you feel yourself spread out everywhere in the universe. But who is experiencing this spreading out in the universe? The true individual, which is called the Jivatman, the individual soul, which is essentially divine, yet it is individual. So the first level of cosmic consciousness is you are aware that you are in the cosmic consciousness. Ego has disappeared, so you don't know who you really are and where you are stationed. You are everywhere. Okay. But then there's another one which Srimdo says the absolute dissolution. Even the true individuality also disappears. It's like a grain of salt on the table. Okay, a grain of salt, then in the sea. Okay, when you put it into a glass of water, there is no grain anymore, but the saltiness is there. That's a true individual. And now that saltiness also disappears into the pure water. That's the absolute nirvana. Absolute nirvana. That's the extinction of not only ego but even your true individuality. This is the levels he has spoken about in the cosmic consciousness. So now I'll just read out to you the previous summary of the previous para, and then we can continue with the para we are going to do today. What does the individual, I'm reading the summary, okay, in the previous para. What does the individual melt into when he enters into the cosmic consciousness? I supply the questions. Srebdo does not supply the question. We have to supply the question to say, oh, in this paragraph, he is dealing with this subject. Okay. So, what does the true individual melt into when he enters the cosmic consciousness? It is the Satchidananda. Okay. The individual becomes the Sat, the one existence of which he is the formation, or he becomes the one consciousness which sees its own works in him and all others. He sees himself in all others. He becomes the will, the force which he is doing all works in the cosmos. You see, you are the universal will. You are not only the universal consciousness, but you are also the universal will. Okay? Then he experiences also the one bliss which takes stock of its own enjoyment in one and in all. That's another. If it's a cosmic consciousness, you can have either the experience of Sat in the cosmic consciousness, or you can have the experience of consciousness, or of power even separately, but power normally is not there, and bliss. And bliss is there, you are aware of your own enjoyment in yourself, in the divine, and in everybody else. That is very interesting. He discusses that elsewhere also. You start enjoying the enjoyment of others. Okay, it's very interesting. Not only you enjoy the bliss within yourself, I am so happy, that's within yourself. Or your relation with the divine, you enjoy your relation with the divine. You are enjoying the divine's bliss. Or the other one, you are enjoying the enjoyment of others. Somewhat like in a cricket team, if Rohit Sharma makes a century, the others also enjoy. Rohit Sharma will enjoy definitely, but the others in the team also will enjoy. Oh, one of our team has made this. So you are enjoying somebody else's enjoyment. All these are possible in the experience of the bliss. Okay. Then, even though the individual is doing all works in the multiplicity of the world, he is stably settled in the cosmic consciousness, which is what? What is the cosmic consciousness? Immutable, silent, timeless, spaceless. He is not affected at all by the active surge of the transient world. All are waves which you see only on the surface of your being. Anything that comes, even the thoughts that are occurring you in your brain, you see them as small ripples on the surface of your sea, and you have become the sea. Okay? Then, Satchidananda is the unity of the many-sidedness of manifested things. It's the unity of the manifested things. Satchidananda is the eternal harmony of all variations and dualities. All variations are there in the physical world. The variations are opposite to each other. In the Satchidananda, they are not oppositions, but they are complementary aspects. Then Satchidananda is the infinite perfection which makes us understand the need of limitations. When you realize that, you realize, oh, all the perversion and the quarrels and all the disharmonies that are happening is a natural consequence of manifestation. In the manifestation, manifestation equals to multiplicity. You can't have a manifestation of one without multiplicity because it remains unmanifest. But when you manifestation occurs, multiplicity is a natural consequence, and multiplicity means everything possible. Therefore, there are contraries also. But in the Satchidananda consciousness, you realize that they are complementary aspects. They are not opposites. Okay. So, Satchidananda is an infinite perfection, makes us understand the need of limitations and dualities in the physical world. So all the pain and suffering in the physical world gets explained. It has its place. It's not something negative. It is a goading. It goads you to greater heights. If there are no difficulties in life, you won't make an effort. Only when there is a difficulty, you make an effort. Otherwise, you're very comfortable. That's what he said in the previous para. Now we'll start reading the next para. Okay. So much for the essential relation. Who will read? Decide and start. Archana Di, how is your throat today?
Yes, Rangada, I'm reading. Just 1 minute.
Okay. Yeah, take your time.
One.
So much for the essential.
So much for the essential, yes.
Ah, that's right.
So much for the essential relation, but we have to see also the practical results of the internal transformation. If it is evident that by dwelling in this cosmic consciousness, our whole experience and valuation of everything in the universe will be radically changed. As individual egos, we dwell in the ignorance and judge everything by a broken, partial, and personal standard of knowledge. We experience everything according to the capacity of a limited consciousness and force, and are therefore unable to give a divine response or set the true value upon any part of cosmic experience. We experience limitation, weakness, incapacity, grief, pain, struggle, and its contradictory emotions, and we accept these things and their opposites as opposites in an eternal duality and cannot reconcile them in the eternity of an absolute good and happiness. We live by fragments of experience and judge by our fragmentary values each thing and the whole. When we try to arrive at absolute values, we only promote some partial views of things to do duty for a totality in the divine workings. We then make believe that our fractions are integers and try to thrust our one-sided viewpoints into the catholicity of the all vision of the divine.
I think it's very simple what he's saying. In the physical world, when we are in the egoistic consciousness, we are imperfect and we see only in broken bits and pieces. As we described, we are looking at the world through spectacles which are broken. Okay, so we see a division. We see all broken things. It's like uh, the moon shining in troubled waters. You see several moons. This is the example given by Shankara. Okay, the moon is one, but when it's in the troubled waters of the universe, okay, you see many reflections. So the one becomes the many in the universe, in the physical world. Then that's why you don't see the reality. And then naturally, if you don't see the whole and you don't understand, there is incapacity, grief, pain, and struggle. It's very obvious. So when you go back into the highest level, you see that all these things are only distortions, and they are, you get back your total specs without any break in the your spectacles. Okay, so you start seeing the oneness, and then everything falls into place. Even that which is a perversion and a falsehood has its place in the physical world. Everything has a place. It has a meaning and a purpose. There's a purpose to everything. That's basically what he's saying. So, up, perfect harmony. Down below in the physical world, when you are in your body mind life, division and ignorance, and therefore the natural consequence, incapacity, grief, pain, struggle, limitation, weakness. These are all the words he has used. Sridhar goes into great detail. Look at how many words he has used. Limitation, first of all. Remember, limitation always is an implication of the manifestation. Keep those ideas, link them together. You can't have manifestation without a limitation. Then, weakness. If it is limited, obviously it becomes weak. An infinite force becomes limited, it becomes weakness. Incapacity, grief, pain, and suffering. If the ananda becomes broken, it becomes grief and pain and struggle. So, this is what basically you're saying. So, I'll read out the summary and then we'll go on to the next para. It's a very small para. So, in this para, is saying the changes discussed above in the previous para are psychological. They will not be seen necessarily by others. Okay? If somebody is in a cosmic consciousness, others will not see if they are in the in the normal consciousness. The essence of man's consciousness is altered, okay, dramatically. But how will it affect the external life and behavior? Okay? You have to see whether their reactions in the physical world are always understandable or not, and what way does their behavior change? That's what is asking. Okay, so in the normal ego-ridden, imperfect consciousness, man lives in the ignorance. He views the world in fragments, not the whole. All human judgment, while in the ignorance, is broken, piecemeal, distorted, and false. We cannot respond to external impacts in a divine manner. The result is ignorance, weakness, incapacity, grief, pain, struggle. Okay? I've used those words. We accept these as very natural and a necessary part of life. Then we try for absolute values to arrive at the whole. We only manage to raise our partial values to the status of absolute truths, and we try to thrust our own perceptions, opinions, and values on others, pretending that they are the whole and only truths. This is why there is disagreement and disharmony in the physical world. And the disharmony can be everywhere, okay? Even in the ashram. And it comes even to physical blows. That's a funny part, okay? So you would think that in the ashram, there are many people who feel, oh, you are in the ashram. You are so lucky. Many people have told me this, okay? You are so lucky. There is peace, there is calm, there is quiet, there is no problem. Our life in the outside world is full of problems. We have problems every day. So you have to assure them that life is not that peaceful in the physical world. In fact, that's
in fact, I used to think the other way, that we at least have the ashram to go to when we want, where do the ashramites go if they have trouble? I used to have this question.
Let me tell you one thing. Sri Aurobindo in their 20s, okay, many people used to write to Sri Aurobindo. As soon as they came to know that he is in Pondicherry, for many years nobody knew where he was, okay, after Calcutta. Nobody knew. Even the government did not know. But when he made an open letter once, he wrote to the Hindu, I am not in the political field anymore, but I am in Pondicherry and I am leading, I have not renounced the world. I am living I am living a house, I am living as a householder. This is the word he used, okay? No renunciation of the physical world. I am living in Pondicherry and I have not given up the physical world, but I have given up politics. I am not in politics anymore. Okay. Then everybody came to know that he is in Pondicherry. They started writing, sir, I want to come to the ashram and do your yoga. So he used to immediately ask. See, other yogis, other people, so-called yogis will say, very good, very good. My number of disciples will increase. Sri Aurobindo used to say, what is your aim in yoga? What do you want? What is your aim? Then they would reply, I want peace, calm. Okay. Then Sri Aurobindo would say, then you don't come to the ashram. You go to Raman Maharshi's ashram. There you will get, because there the ideal is escape from the physical world. But in my yoga, you will have to face the problems of the physical world and you conquer them here. No peace for you. So, this is what Sri Aurobindo is saying. Okay. So that's what he's saying in this paragraph. So, we don't run away from the physical world. You headlong, you meet the difficulties and conquer them. Try to conquer. But when you can't conquer, there is grief, pain, suffering, disharmony. Yeah. Nowadays there aren't these things, but I'll tell you, it was very funny, but also very upsetting. There was one boy, his name was Shakti, I think, he's a Bengali boy. He actually broke a puja on somebody's head in the dining hall. I'm telling you this because everybody feels that the ashram is peaceful, calm, quiet, perfect harmony. Not at all, because you have not given up the world.
This is their own sansar, their family, and here they created another family. Here they involved in another family. It is not that they come under the true definition of ashramites. That's what
Yeah, but even if you are ashramite without family also, there is all these problems are there. Anyway, so let's go on to the next paragraph. It's very clear what he's saying here. If you are in the physical world, your knowledge is ignorance. Your capacities are incapacities. Your bliss is so-called bliss is full of difficulties. And there is, if you have pleasure, you are bound to have pain also. So you must be above pain and pleasure. That's what happens when you go into the self. When you go into the self, you are not affected first by anything at all. It's absolutely calm, quiet. There is neither pleasure nor displeasure. So when many children say that, oh, then what's the point in going? All life is interesting only when there is all these opposites are there. If it's absolutely, it'll be like a desert, a blankness and a desert. So you have to say that that's the first step. You have to get rid of the ups and downs. And then you experience only pleasure, not pleasure actually, but bliss, enjoyment. So first is to get rid of your, it's like a cup of dirty water. If you want to put pure water into it, you have to first throw away the dirty water. The cup becomes empty. And then you fill it up with pure water. This is the logic of the self. The immutable, impersonal, absolutely calm, quiet, peaceful, without any disturbance at all. That's the logic of the first. You get rid of all your things. What you are calling pleasure is actually also a very, very imperfect thing. It's a distortion of ananda. So get rid of all. Once you have got rid of all, your stage is now set for the positive things. Okay, so let's go to the next paragraph. But by entering into the cosmic consciousness. Archana, they read now. Next. Quickly, any one of you. Yasmin, yeah, you unmuted yourself. Read.
Yeah, I'll read it.
Go ahead.
But by entering into the cosmic consciousness, we begin to participate in that all vision and see everything in the values of the infinite and the one. Limitation itself, ignorance itself change their meaning for us. Ignorance changes into a particularizing action of divine knowledge, strength and weakness, and incapacity change into free putting forth and holding back various measures of divine force, joy and grief, pleasure and pain change into mastering and a suffering of divine delight. Struggle, losing its discords, becomes a balancing of forces and values in the divine harmony. We do not then suffer by the limitations of our mind, life, and body, for we no longer have, or we no longer live in these, even when we record and accept them, but in the infinity of the Spirit. And these we view in their right value and place and purpose in the manifestation, as degrees of the Supreme Being, conscious force and delight of Sachidananda, veiling and manifesting himself in the cosmos. We cease also to judge other men and things by their outward appearances and are delivered from hostile and contradictory ideas and emotions, for it is the soul that we see, the divine that we seek and find in everything and creature, and the rest has only a secondary value to us in a scheme of relations which exist now for us only as self-expressions of the divine and not as having any absolute value in themselves. So too, no event can disturb us, since the distinction of happy and unhappy, beneficent and maleficent happenings loses its force, and all is seen in its divine valuation and its divine purpose. Thus we arrive at a perfect liberation and an infinite equality. It is this consummation of which the Upanishad speaks when it says, "He in whom the self has become all existence, how shall he have delusion? When shall he have grief? Who knows entirely and sees in all things oneness."
Okay. Also very easy to understand what he's saying, but we'll give an image by which you can understand. So he's saying when we are in the normal consciousness, we are ego-ridden and we are enclosed in our body-mind life. So if you think of yourself as living in a small room, okay, and then you feel that why am I not getting capacity? Why am I not getting consciousness? You are living in a small room, but when you go to the cosmic consciousness, you realize that it is your own limited thing which is the problem. The problem is not anything else. Now, if the infinite consciousness wants to come into your room, it is infinite, but how can the infinite come into a finite? So it has to limit itself, and when it limits itself to come into your room, it becomes limited. So then that's the unconsciousness, okay? Exactly in the same way. So, but when you go to the cosmic consciousness, you realize that the problem is your limitedness, your small room. Oh, I was living in the small room, and if the divine wants to enter in, how can he enter into a small room? He has to make himself small. So he has to make his consciousness small, he has to make his power small, he has to make his ananda small to enter into my room. And if he is making himself small, I will only have part of it. And part means again the opposites also come in. So I must get out of my room. So that's what you realize. So you realize that the unconsciousness, the powerlessness, the grief and suffering are all natural consequences of your remaining in a limited room. So you realize that you have to get out of your room. And when you get out of your room, you can experience the infinite consciousness. And when you experience the infinite consciousness, these sufferings and incapacities and all that disappear. You see them in the right light. That's what he's saying. Very simple. That's what he's saying. And he's ending with a from the Isha Upanishad, the quote. Okay, so one who sees in the infinite consciousness, how can he have he can't have any grief or suffering? So I'm reading out the summary of what he's saying here. When man enters the cosmic consciousness, leaving the body life mind behind as an empty house, okay, subject to the stimulations of the universal mechanical force Prakriti, he sees and experiences everything in terms of the infinite and the one. The finiteness, the multiplicity, and the separation are all gone. But even the limitations and the ignorance begin to look different and take on quite other values than those of the ignorance. What happens? What do you realize? Ignorance appears to the cosmic man as a particularization of knowledge, a concentration of some one aspect, and relegating all the rest to the background of his awareness. So this is what you understand, that your limitation is the result of your being small. It has to enter into it, it has to manifest only one aspect. That's what you realize. So even ignorance has a purpose. Okay. Then it's saying strength, for instance. Strength, weakness, incapacity appear to man as a putting forth of some aspect of omnipotence and holding back of most other forms of Shakti. This is in order to manifest some limited aspects of the infinite Shakti. I'll give you another instance by which we can understand this. Why does man become incapable? Because he is living in the limited consciousness. Okay. A very simple example. I want to drive a nail, I want to knock a nail into my wall. How much force should I use? If I use too little force, that nail won't go into the wall. And if I use the infinite force, I will break the wall. So I have to use, for a limited work, I have to use a limited amount of force. So that is the reason the physical world is limited in comparison with the infinite unlimitedness of the divine. So the divine has to naturally mold his infinite power to suit the physical world of limitation. So that's why there is limitation, and limitation in consciousness, limitation in ananda, limitation in power. That's the reason, and that you understand when you go there. So now you see the logic of the limitations and the suffering and the pain, and you don't see it anymore in that way. That's exactly what he's saying. Okay? So strength, weakness, incapacity appear to man as a putting forth of some aspect of omnipotence and holding back of most other forms of Shakti. This is in order to manifest some limited aspects of the infinite Shakti. Similarly, joy and grief, pleasure and pain now appear to him as a mastery and suffering of the supreme divine delight. Okay? His struggle, now bereft of dualities, because he is in the cosmic consciousness, now bereft of dualities and disharmony, now seems to be various aspects of harmony and varied truths. Now, when man lives in the cosmic consciousness, he lives in the infinity and the eternity of the divine. He does not suffer the dualities and the disharmonies of the ignorance. So that so tormented him in the earlier periods. All dualities that are presented to man in the cosmic consciousness appear now as various values, all now placed in their right value and function in their rightful place. This mother also says, she says that everything in the physical world has a purpose, but you have to see it in the right, it all is there in the right place, but we don't see it in the right place. Okay? Ignorance also has its purpose, but we don't see it in that way. Man now sees no oppositions when he is in the cosmic consciousness. Man now sees no oppositions, no enmities, no hostility, because it's the divine presence that is seen in all things. Judgment by mere appearance is now abolished. That's the reason why Mother and Srindu do not judge you by your outer nature. Okay? They judge you by what the soul wants. And Srindu says also very clearly, the divine gives to a person what the soul wants, not what your body-mind life is asking. Okay? I think I told you once an interesting case now of a man who came here. He pretended to be a person in the Air Force. It turned out to be absolutely false. He is not an Air Force man at all. So he was there for 2-3 months, and mother was giving him a lot of attention. Okay. When he went away, uh, I think his name was Sony. Okay, he's from Delhi, and he was in the Air Force. So when he came here, they asked him, "Oh, one of your colleagues was here." He said, "Who?" So when they told him the name, he said, "There's no such person in the Air Force." So then somebody went to mother and said, "Mother, you know that fellow to whom you are giving so much attention, he was a fraud." So mother answered, "Do you think that I look at the outer aspects of a man? It's the soul that I see and what." So a soul is essentially divine, and it can be lodged in a body and a mind and life with very many imperfections. So this is what also I'll tell you one instance. Champaklal lived for so many years with Sri Aurobindo. Okay, his inside may have been absolutely quite different, but he used to get very angry. He used to get very angry quickly. Okay, and someone asked Sri Aurobindo, okay, that Sri Aurobindo said, yes, yes, his outer nature, yeah, there is anger in his outer nature. And there was a Swiss boy in Pondicherry. I remember he coming and telling me, Champaklal is supposed to be such a great yogi. Why does he get so angry? That's the outer nature. The inner nature gets transformed, and the behavior changes to a certain extent in the physical world. But that doesn't mean to say that you are the outer nature. The outer nature is imperfect in everybody because there are limitations. The body is limited, the vital is limited, the mind is limited. And limitation means imperfections. So this is what he never understood. Okay, so if you are in that consciousness, you will not suffer any pain and suffering. In the cosmic consciousness, in the self, immutable, you are absolutely free of all problems and troubles and incapacity. Seeing the soul in all, the divine essence in everything, does not exclude the seeing of multifarious forms. You do see forms, you do see colors. It's not that you see everything in a neutral color. Everything you do understand. Someone is superior, someone is inferior, you do understand, but it doesn't affect you. But these external forms are now seen as of secondary importance. The calm, peaceful man no longer experiences the happy and the unhappy, the beneficent and the maleficent, the oppositions that kill the spirit. By the way, the word beneficent and maleficent is efficient. If there's an I after C, you would say sh. Okay. Beneficent, sir. And the maleficent, the oppositions that kill the spirit. As the Isha Upanishad says, Yasmin Sarvani Bhutani Atma Eva Abhut. I'm breaking up the Sandhi. Tasya ko moha kaha shoka ekatvam manupashyata. The one who sees oneness everywhere does not see multiplicity. How can he have ever any moha? How can he have any problem? No shoka, no moha. Okay. This is what this he is quoting from the Isha Upanishad. Okay, what's the time? 29. We got 5 minutes, 6 minutes. We need one more para, all small paras. Gita, you can read? Or if Gita is not there on the line, maybe Sunki, you can read maybe?
Yes, I will read.
Okay, go ahead, read it. We'll read the Bible.
Okay. But this can be But this can be only when there is perfection in the cosmic consciousness, and that is difficult for the mental being. The mentality, when it arrives at the idea or realization of the spirit, the divine, tends to break existence into two opposite halves, the lower and the higher existence. It sees on one side the infinite, the formless, the one, the peace and bliss, the calm and silence, the absolute, the vast and pure, On the other, it sees the finite, the world of forms, the jarring multiplicity, the strife and suffering and imperfect, unreal good, concrete activity, and future success, the relative, the limited, and vain and vile. To those who make this division and this supposition, true liberation is only attainable in the peace of the One, in the featurelessness of the Infinite, in the non-becoming of the Absolute, which is to them the only real being. To be free, all values must be destroyed, all limitations not only transcended but abolished. They have the liberation of the divine rest, but not the liberty of the divine action. They enjoy the peace of transcendent, but not the cosmic bliss of the transcendent. Their liberty depends upon abstention from the cosmic movement. It cannot dominate and possess cosmic existence itself. But it is also possible for them to realize and participate in the immanent as well as the transcendent peace. Still, the division is not cured. The liberty they enjoy is that of the silent, unacting. Witness not the liberty of the divine. Witness not the liberty of the divine master consciousness, which possesses all things, delight in all, casts itself into all forms of existence with a fear of fall or loss or bondage or stain. All these rights of the spirit are not yet possessed. There is still a denial, a limitation, a holding back from the entire oneness of all existence. The workings of mind, life, body are viewed from the calm and peace of the spiritual planes of the mental being and are filled with that calm and peace. They are not possessed by and subjected to the law of the all-mastering spirit.
So they make a difference between ascent and descent. Okay, when your consciousness ascends to the higher levels of consciousness, you experience your consciousness experiences the cosmic consciousness and is aware of the divine. But in the body-mind life, your consciousness which is left in the body-mind is still subject to the old habits of suffering, pain, incapacity. Okay, and it is not very easy to bring down that into the lower. The higher things are not very easy to bring down into the lower. Okay, so I'll read out the summary of what he's saying and we'll go into detail next time. Okay, so because this is a very, very fundamental difficulty of the normal yoga. What you experience in the higher planes, you can't bring it down very easily into the lower. And that's what Sri Aurobindo, he had written to Mother once, the heavens we have possessed, but not yet the earth. In other words, what I have experienced in the higher levels of consciousness, I am not able to make it a practical reality in the physical world. So that's what. And the others don't care for it. The others say impossible to do that. So I only concentrate on the ascent. I don't want the descent. I don't want to come down into my body, my life, which is a dirty house. Why should I come down into a dirty house? I'll escape it. So I'm reading the summary. What has been described in the previous para is possible only when the cosmic consciousness is perfect and complete, not merely half realized. Much before that, the cosmic consciousness can be experienced partially, not in its full splendor. The perfect cosmic consciousness is not easy for the mentality of man. The nature of mind is to divide, analyze, never to synthesize. It makes a division between spirit and matter. It separates the two poles of existence. The immutable and the mutable, the formless and the finite forms, timeless, spaceless, and time and space, the one and the many. This is what the mind does, divides the permanent and the transient, the absolute and the relative, unity and the jarring multiplicity, the pure and the impure. I'm giving you a list of all the contraries. The bliss and the pain and suffering, all these are opposites which you see when you are in the novel consciousness. To those who make the difference between the one and the many, the immutable and the dynamism, they can attain to the peace and the purity of the absolute. liberation into the self, which is interpreted as illusion. Okay? The physical world is interpreted as illusion, and I take my consciousness out of the illusion into the absolute. To such a man, liberation means to be free from all values, a perfectly featureless consciousness. Nirvana, to go into the self. For such individuals, there is liberation. There is liberation, there is peace and inactivity. For what? For the soul. Silence. This is what you get. But he can never have the power to act in the physical world in a divine manner. He can have calmness, but not the bliss, the joy of divine action. He will have to go away. He may even experience the transcendent as well as the immanent. Dynamic divine action in the world eludes him. He does not enjoy the divine bliss and power. Such a person's liberty depends upon the complete severance from the physical world. He is a mere witness, never the master consciousness engaged in divine works. There is no possession of the spirit. All the workings and functionings of the body-mind life are viewed with a completely detached witness, peace. He cannot be a master. He can only be a watcher. He can only be a witness. But he can never be a... When can he be a master? When he brings down what he experienced in the higher level, knowledge, power, bliss, into the physical world, into his body-mind life. He descends into his body-mind life without losing the peace and the knowledge that he has got. This is what I am saying in the pattern. We'll look at it next time in detail. This is a very important point because there are many implications also. We'll go into all that next time. So now it is already we have gone 2 minutes beyond the time. Okay? I have already.
Merci beaucoup.
Au revoir, everybody.
Au revoir,
Archanadi, Geeta, and Shilpa, not Shilpi.
Thank you, Rangada.
There is a Shilpi in knowledge.
Au revoir, Rangada. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Same to everybody.
Thank you, Rangada.
Yeah. Tomorrow we meet for essays on the Gita.